The history books will record that the Emperor awoke with fire. They will say that he rose from the golden throne like a phoenix, casting down the enemies of mankind with a wave of his hand. They will speak of glory, they will speak of salvation. But I was there, I, Malcian Vane, shield captain of the Hetairon Guard, was there when the eyes of the Master opened. And I tell you now, it was not glory that filled the Sanctum Imperialis. It was terror. For 10,000 years the throne room had been a tomb, smelling of dust, incense, and the slow rotting decay of a god corpse. But when he woke, the decay vanished in an instant, replaced by a sensation that was not heat, but a freezing, absolute clarity. It was the feeling of a microscope being focused. It was the cold sun. In the months that followed his awakening, the Master did not rest. He did not rejoice. He worked. He moved through the Imperial Palace like a force of nature, dismantling the machinery of the state. I watched him stand before the high lords of Terra, men and women, who had ruled in his name for centuries. And I watched him strip their minds bare. He did not shout, he simply looked at them, and they wept as they realized the depth of their failure. He saw the corruption, the hoarding of technology, the superstitious rot that had replaced the imperial truth. He began the great consecration. The Ecclesiarchy trembled. The Inquisition scrambled to justify its existence. The Emperor was returning the galaxy to reason, one decree at a time. He was a scientist in a laboratory that had been taken over by witch doctors, and he was throwing out their totems. But there was one totem he could not simply discard. One anomaly that defied his logic. One creature that represented the very apex of the madness he sought to cure. He summoned her on the 93rd day. The doors of the sanctum, vast slabs of adamantium that usually required a choir of tech priests to operate, swung open without a sound. The air in the chamber changed. The smell of ozone, usually sharp and metallic, from the Emperor's own psychic output, was suddenly overwhelmed by a cloying, heavy scent. It smelled of roses, of graveyard lilies, and of old blood. And then she descended. Saint Celestine, the living saint, the Palatine Phoenix. I have stood before greater demons of the warp. I have faced the horrors of the Xanos, but nothing prepared me for the visceral wrongness of seeing her enter the Emperor's presence. She did not walk. She drifted, suspended by wings that were not biological, but manifested from psychic fire. A storm of golden light surrounded her, so bright it hurt the eyes of my helm's auto senses. Doves, creatures that have been extinct on Terra for millennia, circled her halo. They were not real. They were thoughts, shaped into matter by the sheer force of her belief. She was beautiful. She was magnificent. And in the context of the Emperor's new rational Imperium, she was an abomination. 10 to 20. Part 2. The Collision of Realities. She landed on the obsidian floor, her armored boots making a sound like a church bell tolling. She fell to her knees, prostrating herself before the throne. "My lord," she wept, her voice echoing with a harmonic reverb that sounded like 1,000 voices singing in unison. "My creator, my God." The silence that followed was heavier than the crushing gravity of a neutron star. The Emperor stood at the foot of the throne. He was no longer the withered corpse on the chair. He was a man, a giant of a man, clad in aramite, his face restored to the terrible perfection of the Great Crusade. But as she spoke that word God, I saw him flinch. It was a small thing, a tightening of the corner of his mouth, a shadow passing behind his eyes. To the billions of faithful, this woman was the ultimate expression of his will. But to him, she was the ultimate insult. She was proof that Lorgar, the traitor's son, had won the cultural war. Rise, he said. His voice was not the booming thunder of legend. It was human. It was tired. It was the voice of a man who has worked a double shift in a factory only to come home and find his house on fire. I cannot stand before the sun without burning, my lord, she replied, pressing her face to the floor. Let me kneel. Let me bask in your radiance. Rise, he repeated, sharper this time. And for the sake of sanity, woman, stop glowing. The command baffled her. The golden light that radiated from her armor, a light measured at 40,000 lumens, did not dim. It flared. I do not know how, my God Emperor, she stammered. Do not call me that, he snapped. He began to pace around her, his movements predatory, analytical. I am a man, a perpetual, a psyker of extreme magnitude. I am the anathema to the warp, but I am not a god. Gods are parasites. I am the cure. He stopped in front of her. He reached out a hand not to bless her, but to inspect the halo of light around her head. He passed his hand through it. The light did not burn him. It curled around his fingers like smoke. You are leaking kinetic energy, he stated, as if diagnosing a faulty engine. This aura, it is inefficient. You are broadcasting your position to every entity in the Imperium. Suppress it. She tried. I watched the living saint, the warrior who had slain demon princes, screw her eyes shut and clench her fists. She tried to obey her god, but the tragedy of the warp is that it responds to emotion, not logic. Her distress, her desperate desire to please him only fueled the fire. The light grew brighter, turning from gold to a blinding white. The doves multiplied, filling the air with the frantic sound of wings. The Emperor sighed. It was a sound of profound disappointment. He realized in that moment that he was shouting at a fire to be cold. 20 hours, 0 minutes to 35 hours, 0 minutes. Part 3. The Autopsy of a Miracle. Malcian, he said, acknowledging me for the first time. Secure the chamber, clear the tech priests. I need to dissect this miracle.
He did not mean physically. He meant metaphysically.
The Emperor turned his gaze upon her, and I saw the cold sun fully engage. He peeled back the layers of her reality. He looked past the armor, past the flesh, and into the soul. Fascinating, he murmured. And horrifying. Is my soul pleasing to you, my lord? She asked, her voice trembling with hope. I see a battery, he said coldly. Celestine, do you have any concept of what you actually are? She looked up, comforted. I am your vessel. I am the sword in your hand. You are a psyker, he corrected. An unconscious, unbound psyker. But you are unique. You are not drawing power from the warp in the traditional sense. You are drawing power from me. He paused, correcting himself. No, not me. You're drawing power from the idea of me. This is the secret that the Ecclesiarchy hides. This is the truth that Script 2 hinted at. The Emperor explained it to her then in brutal scientific terms. He explained that for 10,000 years, humanity had been screaming into the void. Their fear, their hatred, their desperation, all coalesced in the warp. It formed a reservoir of psychic energy flavored by the specific dogmas of the Imperial Cult. "You are not a saint," he said. "You are an Imperial demon," she gasped. The sound was like a physical blow. "Demon? I fight the demon. I burn them. I am the antithesis of the dark gods." "You are a weapon forged from the same mechanism," he insisted. "The ruinous powers create demon princes by pouring their essence into a mortal vessel. Humanity has done the same to you. You are a construct of faith. You are a weapon made of my failure." He walked to the strategy table, waving his hand to conjure holographic displays of her battles. He showed her the footage. He showed her wading through the hordes of the despoiler, her blade wreathed in fire. "Look at the efficiency," he said, pointing to the data. "Statistical anomalies in the 99th percentile. You win battles that logic dictates you should lose. You inspire fear in the never-born. They recoil from you because you represent the one thing that can hurt them. Anathema energy. But you wield it without understanding it." "I wield it with faith," she cried.
Faith is just a word for a psychic wavelength you haven't bothered to measure, he shouted back.
The conflict in the room was palpable. It was not a conflict of arms, but of paradigms. On one side, the greatest scientist humanity had ever produced, a man who wanted to starve the gods by removing belief. On the other side, a woman who proved that belief was the only ammunition left. He hated her, not personally, but conceptually. She was the living proof that his great crusade had failed. He had wanted a galaxy of reason. Instead, he got a galaxy where women turn into birds made of light because they pray hard enough. 35 to 50. Part 4. The Mountain of Skulls. The conversation turned darker. The Emperor asked the question that had plagued him since he accessed her file. "The resurrection," he said. "Explain the mechanism." Celestine's demeanor changed. She stood straighter. This was her territory. This was her sacrifice. "Death is but a shadow," she recited, her voice gaining strength. "I fall. I wake in the cold. I climb the mountain of skulls. I traverse the labyrinth of decay. I fight through the garden. I find the light. And I pull myself back to you." "You traverse the warp," the Emperor translated. "Unprotected. Without a Geller field. Without a body. My faith is my shield." "Your faith is a delusion that hardens your soul skin. Nothing more," he dismissed. "How many times, Celestine?" 17 times, she said. She said it with such pride. 17 times I've laid down my life for you, my Emperor. 17 times I have felt the claws of the beast, the bolter of the traitor. 17 times I have died screaming your name." She looked at him, expecting a reward, expecting a father's hand on her shoulder, expecting him to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Instead, the Emperor looked at her with a mixture of horror and revulsion. "Do you think that pleases me?" he whispered. "My lord, Do you think I sat on that golden throne, rotting for 10 millennia, wishing for my children to be butchered in my name? His voice rose to a roar that shook the dust from the banners high above. I wanted you to live. I wanted you to conquer the stars, so that no human would ever have to kneel in the mud and beg for salvation again. I created the Astartes to die, so that you wouldn't have to. And here you stand, bragging about your own murder. He paced away from her, running a hand through his hair, a human gesture of frustration that looked bizarre on a being of such power. You are a victim, he said softly. You are being tortured. Every time you die, the collective psychic will of the Imperium grabs your soul and drags it screaming back into reality. They won't let you rest. They are too terrified to let you die. You are a prisoner of their hope. And then he twisted the knife. He pointed to the space behind her. And you are not alone. Two shimmering figures materialized behind the saint, the Gemini Superior, Eleanor and Genevieve, her loyal bodyguards who appear whenever she is threatened. They floated there, translucent, silent, their bolters raised. My sisters, Celestine whispered. They serve you through me. They are dead, the Emperor said brutally. They died centuries ago on a battlefield you have long forgotten. Look at them, Celestine. Really look at them. He forced her vision open. He forced her to see with his eyes. She looked, and she screamed. She did not see her sisters. She saw spiritual husks. She saw puppets made of memory and warp stuff. You are a necromancer, the Emperor declared. Your grief is so potent, your psychic resonance so uncontrolled, that you have enslaved the remnants of their souls. You drag them out of the grave every time you manifest. You're haunting yourself. The realization broke her. The golden light shattered. The doves vanished into puffs of logic. She fell to the floor, not in worship, but in defeat. She looked at her hands she thought were holy, and saw only the hands of a monster. If I am not your angel, she whispered, her voice small and broken, then what am I? 50 minutes, 60 minutes, Part 5. The pragmatic lie. The Emperor stood over her. He had won. He had deconstructed the miracle. He had proven, with logic and reason, that she was nothing more than a psychic anomaly fueled by mass hysteria. He raised his hand. I saw the energy gather in his palm. He could end it. He could sever the warp connection. He could grant her the peace of oblivion. She would die. Finally and truly, the sane would be gone, and the lie would be exposed. But then, the alarms began to ring. It was a harsh, discordant sound that cut through the philosophy of the moment. Strategic alert. Sector 4. Hive Primus. Nurgle incursion. The Emperor looked at the tactical map. A rift had opened in the lower hab blocks. The rot was spreading. Not just a physical plague, but a spiritual one. Despair was blooming like a black flower. The people were not just dying. They were giving up. They were whispering prayers to the grandfather because they had no hope left. The Emperor looked at the map. He calculated the troop movements. He calculated the time it would take to deploy the custodes. He calculated the efficiency of flame weapons against the spiritual plague. Science could burn the bodies. Reason could quarantine the infection. But science could not cure despair. He looked down at Celestine. She was broken. She was waiting for him to unmake her. My lord, she whispered, grant me peace. The Emperor looked at the billions of souls crying out in the dark. He looked at the woman who had died 17 times to save them. He realized then the terrible truth of the 41st millennium. The truth that Gilliman had tried to tell him. The Imperium was too damaged for the truth. The wound was too deep for the scalpel. It needed the bandage. The Emperor made a choice. He killed the scientist, and he let the god take over. He reached down and placed a hand on her shoulder. The touch was warm. It rippled with golden power, not the cold light of reason, but the warm, blinding light of faith. "You are wrong," he lied. She looked up, eyes wide. "You are not a mistake," he said, his voice echoing with the power of the throne. "You are my fire. You are the light that holds back the dark. The mechanism does not matter, Celestine. The source does not matter. The duty matters." "Then I am your angel?" He hesitated, just for a heartbeat. I saw the pain in his eyes, the pain of a man condemning a woman he respected to an eternity of torture. "You are what they need you to be," he said. "Now go. Save my people." The effect was instantaneous. The doubt vanished. The broken battery recharged in a microsecond. The golden light exploded outward, brighter than a supernova. The wings of fire erupted from her back, scorching the very air. The doves returned, singing a chorus of woe. "I shall not fail you," she screamed, a cry of pure, ecstatic purpose. She launched herself into the air, smashing through the stained glass of the sanctum's ceiling. A comet of holy fire streaking toward the burning hab blocks. I watched her go. I turned to my master. He stood in the shadows, his hand still raised, the golden light fading from his fingertips. He looked old, older than time. "You lied to her, my lord," I said. "She's dead, Malthian," he replied softly. "The woman she was died a long time ago. What remains is a creature of pure will. If I take away her faith, she dissolves. If I take away the lie, she dies." "And the truth?" I asked. "The imperial truth." He walked back to the strategy table, looking at the map of a galaxy consumed by war. "The truth is a luxury," he said. "And we are paupers." He went back to work. He went back to the maps, the logistics, the cold equations of survival. But as he worked, I saw him glance upward, just once, toward the hole in the roof where the angel had flown. And for the first time in 10,000 years, I think the Emperor prayed. Not to a god, but for forgiveness.